I'm going to explain to you what Git is, how to set it up, and use it. This is targeted at game artists like myself, so it should be fairly easy to follow. Git is an open source version control system, something like Perforce, though there are definitely some differences. This is really ideal if you have multiple computers that you're working on, so you want to easily continue your work at home that you were doing at the office, but it wasn't convenient to set up Perforce. It can also be used in a team, which I have done successfully many times. I can recommend it. Perforce is a little bit more geared towards game art, but the advantage of Git is that it's very easy to set up and very easy to maintain, and mostly free. We'll get into that later. There's going to be a very small cost. So this is the webpage for Git. You can find some information here if you're interested in that. Git has an important limitation for game artists, which is that it doesn't like big files. Git is made by and for software developers and web developers, and they typically don't deal with huge files. There's an extension though called Git LFS, which solves this problem, and I'm going to explain something about that later on as well. For now, you can go to GitHub and make sure you create an account here. This will be our server. So this is where our files will get uploaded. GitHub is owned. GitHub is a great platform, but it is owned by Microsoft. And if you have some concerns about that, like for example privacy, then you might want to check out GitLab, which is an independent company. Git primarily works through a console interface, writing commands. But for artists like ourselves, that's usually not really a pleasant way to work. So I recommend GitHub Desktop as a graphical interface. This will just give you buttons, to press to be able to upload your files. And GitHub Desktop is very simple, it's minimalist, and it protects the user. So it prevents you from doing some things that could mess up your Git repo. After you've installed GitHub Desktop, you can log in, and you should see something like this. So I created this folder, which contains an Unreal Engine project, and a folder called Working Files Yolan, which contains something like a Blender file and other things. I called it Yolan just in case you're working with multiple people in a team, then you might want to create a folder for each developer. So from GitHub Desktop, we're going to create a new repository from your local drive. We're going to navigate to the folder where those folders are located. And I'm going to take the end of it, take it off, and put it as a repository name. So now you can see the where the repository will be created. We don't need a README. I am going to set a gitignore preset for Unreal Engine, but we will be modifying this. I'm going to create repository. Once it's done, we see a big list of files, but it immediately disappears. GitHub Desktop immediately changes this into a commit. I don't really like that because there are some things we want to change. So I'm going to undo commit, which brings our files all back here. This should be somewhat familiar to people who've used Perforce. We've got a big bunch of files here. But there's things I'm not happy about. For example, all of these files here, intermediate, derived data cache, even some of the saved files, they're generated by Unreal Engine locally and don't need to be submitted to a server. Similarly, the blend1 file is a Blender backup file. I also don't need that on the server. That's where a gitignore comes in handy. So if we go back to the folder where Git has created a repository, we can see a couple new files. And I want to call your attention to this, the gitignore. A gitignore, we'll see here, is a list of files that Git should not submit to the server. Now there are some issues with this. I'm gonna fix it. For that, I have my own gitignore, and I'll be copying over the changes. I'll provide this, of course. Okay, so I've pasted it in, and I'll show you what's there. So I've added, for example, here, any blend1 file should be ignored. Now here, it's going to ignore all those folders like intermediate and plugins. Right here, it should say the name of the project, right? So if we're in here, these folders are located in here, such as the intermediate folder. So we want to take this name, the name of the Unreal Engine project, and paste it into these places. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to save it. Now when we go back to Git, you see there's a lot fewer files. Those intermediate files, those saved files, they're gone, and the blend1 file is gone as well. Next, we want to take a look at this file, the Git attributes. It's right here. Let's open that one up as well. You can see it's mostly empty. I don't know everything you can do with Git attributes, but I know it controls LFS, the large file system extension. It checks which files are considered LFS files, and so should be uploaded in a different manner. I have another Git attributes version here that I'm going to copy over. You can see that I, for example, added .blend file, Substance Painter files, Substance Designer files, and I might add files later on as necessary. Long story short, what this does here in the back is it, for example, prevents Git from trying to merge two different versions of the file, which can cause issues with binary files. It's not important. Just copy it over. I'm going to save that as well. Okay, now that we've made these changes, we can resubmit this. So here you write the description of your commit. In this case, initial commit is just fine. And I'm going to commit. That brings the commit over to my history, but that doesn't mean it's uploaded to the server yet. This is a package of files that's waiting to be sent up. So now I can publish the repository. We're just going to upload it to GitHub. It's going to prompt me for a few things, because the repository, as far as GitHub is concerned, doesn't exist yet on the server. I'm going to keep the name the same. I don't need the description. In this case, I'm going to keep the code private. But if you're working on a project that you think can be public, great. Maybe other people can benefit from it. I don't need to put this in an organization. I'm going to publish repository. If you're on a different computer, and now you want to continue working on this project, you install GitHub Desktop like normally, but this time you add a repository by cloning it. And so you can go to your GitHub and find which repositories there are. Find the project you've created on your initial computer, and just continue work from there. So after I published my repository to the server, I wanted to show you what happens with a large file of 100 megabytes or over. To my surprise, I was able to upload this large file without any issue. I was under the impression that I would have to install Git LFS as well. Turns out that GitHub Desktop these days comes equipped with Git and Git LFS pre-installed, so there's nothing else you have to do. However, there's a small payoff. Literally, Git LFS takes some bandwidth, and that's where the little bit of the cost from GitHub comes from. So if you go to GitHub and you go to settings, and then go to billing and licensing, let's go to budgets and alerts for now. you can see here I've set a $10 budget for Git LFS storage. If you're getting an issue with trying to upload a large file, you might have to go here and edit to change your budget. Git LFS is not very expensive with GitHub. There's a web page here where you can find out exactly how the calculations work. Suffice to say, I've never paid more than a couple bucks per month. And once you're done with your project, you can always just remove it from GitHub so you're not paying for the storage anymore. Now I'm going to show you a little bit about what a day-to-day process looks like with Git and some tips and tricks. So if you're by yourself, it's a lot easier. If you're with a team, there's a couple things to pay attention to. At the start of the day, I always fetch. That's like update or refresh, just to check if any other developers on the repository have made any changes, and I can pull their latest changes. The most important difference for us with Git versus Perforce is that files don't get locked. So, if you start editing an asset, and someone else at the same time also makes a change to that asset, when both of you submit your changes to the repository, one of you is going to end up with a conflict, and you're going to have to figure out, am I going to use my file or their file? By fetching and pulling at the start of the day, you can minimize the risk that you have an out-of-date version of a file. Also, you'll want to close Unreal Engine before you fetch and pull changes. Unreal Engine can get confused if files change while it's open. So if you are pulling changes or switching to a different branch, do that while Unreal Engine is closed. So I've made a couple changes in Engine and closed it. I added a level, a mesh, and a plugin called Ultra Dynamic Sky. So I tend to check whether everything looks correct to me, and that all makes sense. Then I write a commit, added level and blockout mesh, and then I will commit. Committing is packaging the files, but it's not yet submitted to the server. So you can see in history, there's my commit, but it's not yet been uploaded. Push means upload. So I'm going to click that. And now it's on the server, ready to be used by other people or by myself on another computer. If you're going to be using Git in a team, then I do recommend having someone on the team who's a little bit experienced with this. It'll help them bug fix an issue and just in general manage Git. For example, if you're in a team, I recommend creating branches. Branches where only certain files are to be edited. So you could have a materials team, and they're the only people who are allowed to edit the materials. You could have a branch for a specific level, and only they are allowed to edit those files. When those branches get merged, there will be conflicts, possibly. And then you can see, oh hey, this level has been added by someone in the material branch and by someone in the level branch. We should probably use the change from the level branch. Anyway, I hope that was helpful.